Good evening and welcome to this episode of Legally Noiret or Legally Raven Haired. We're still trying to decide. Today we're going to talk about legal service providers, and we're going to do it this way because we edit while we record disclosures, and this is done for 2022. So this is done as a process of understanding online legal service providers as they're growing. What are some of the things that they are doing to protect themselves and to let consumers understand what they are getting when they decide to use online legal service providers for documents, templates, corporate formation, and the like? What I found out really is that there's more than just a disclosure. These websites have pages of terms and conditions or terms of engagement that they let people use. Some of the websites actually make the user actually accept to show acknowledgement that they've actually read the terms and procedures, which is actually a very good idea. Most people just click it. I know that I'm guilty of that. However, it is good to do it that way so that you can make sure that people are actually at least aware that there are terms and conditions. So the companies that we consider here was Cooligo, Oric, Legalzoom, Rocket Lawyer, and Law Depot. Lastly, we need to do some more research on Law Depot, but this nice slide had 5 spaces, and so I wanted to use five different companies. So Cooligo is an online legal portal that provides users with legal information and access to certain self-help fill in the blank forms. Cooligo really is kind of focused on business formation and businesses. Oric is an international law firm that also offers legal documents. Legalzoom is the nation's, being the United States, leading provider of personalized online legal solutions and legal documents for small businesses and families. Rocket Lawyer they combine free legal documents and free legal information with access to affordable representation by licensed attorneys. Rocket Lawyer is actually part of the state of Utah's legal sandbox, and so they actually have gotten some permission to bypass some regulation as part of an innovation program to see how they can better service their customers. So one of the things that's interesting about Rocket Lawyer, I found, is that Rocket Lawyer didn't just want to offer people access to attorneys if you have more questions, but they actually wanted to hire attorneys. So these are non-lawyers that are actually allowed to hire lawyers under the Utah sandbox provision. And they said they wanted to do this because what happens is when they just link up someone to an attorney, they have no control of the follow through that happens, and that would come back and tarnish their reputation. So in this way, they actually employ attorneys, at least in the state of Utah, that can then help people to go take the next step. Rocket Lawyer's concept is kind of a flat fee payment. You have a scope of work, and if you want more work, then you have to do a new engagement and pay for that scope of work. And then Law Depot, the leading publisher of do-it-yourself legal documents, forms, and contracts. So here's just some of the terms that I saw. Not all of them had the same terms, but basically there was a lot of similarities between them. So one of the things that, not legal advice, that was one of the things that was very, very stressed in all of the documents. As you can see here, it says Cooligo site is not intended to constitute specific legal, tax, and or accounting advice or to be a substitute from advice from qualified counsel. Oric said, while the site and the site content concern legal issues, the site and site content are not intended to and do not constitute legal advice. And Rocket Lawyer, it says Rocket Lawyer provides a platform for legal information and self-help. The information provided by Rocket Lawyer, along with the content of our service related to legal matters, is provided for your private use and does not constitute legal advice. Rocket Lawyer, if you want to do a separate agreement, they do have lawyers in the state of Utah that can help you. But overall, the site is, the information there is not legal advice. Dispute resolution was another big one that I saw there. Everybody was like, look, we are going to arbitrate. Okay. There were all different forms of how arbitration is going to be done, who's going to pay for it, where it's going to occur. Legalzoom, I just thought was super consumer friendly. They said, look, we want to arbitrate. They explained what arbitration is. And they said, unless you bring some frivolous lawsuit, we'll actually pay for the arbitration, the cost of the arbitration. and even recover some of your legal fees. I assume that's if you win. But the point is that Legalzoom was really consumer friendly with this, and I was kind of impressed. I'm going to go ahead and make this capitalized. All right. Governing law. This I thought was really, really cool. And I thought this was really cool because I'm studying civil procedure right now. And, I listened to a podcast and it was like, contracts and those type of things are things that we see in real law, but civil procedure is something that not real law in real life, but civil procedure is something that we don't see in real life. But in these terms and conditions, my whole life, civil procedure has been there, which I thought was really cool. So what they did is they had governing law provisions that tells you, should we have a dispute, this is where we are going to handle the dispute. So in Orica says you agree that the site shall be deemed solely based in California and the site shall be deemed a passive one and does not give rise to personal jurisdiction over us, either specific or general in jurisdictions other than California. So when I read this, I got so excited because I've been studying specific and personal jurisdiction. And here it is right here, or it says that, you know what? California is where we exist, and that is where you can have specific or general jurisdiction. Now, whether or not the court would agree, I don't know, but that is what they are putting out there. So this is civil procedure in real life, and that makes me really excited, if you can tell by my voice. All right, so now, not to be confused with jurisdiction in this case, because we're talking about jurisdiction in terms of if you have a dispute and you want to bring some type of lawsuit. I also want to mention, sorry, let me just go back here to dispute resolution. By far and large, all of the companies were like, look, we're not doing any class action stuff, right? So it's individual only. So I forgot to mention that. Now let's go back forward to jurisdiction. So here, this jurisdiction is saying, look, different states have different laws. And here you go. You right here, Cooligo says, may not reflect recent developments in the law, may not be complete, and may not be accurate or applicable to your jurisdiction. So you have to remember that there is some federal law, but law is state specific. And so something that is true where I used to live in Texas is not necessarily true in the state of Vermont, where I'm studying to in the law office study program. So that's something that you really need to remember. All right. Here's another big one. No attorney-client relationship. They want you to know Cooligo is not your attorney. Law Depot is not your attorney. And Rocket Lawyer, if you engage a Rocket Lawyer attorney to provide legal advice, you will enter into a separate engagement that creates an attorney-client relationship between you and our affiliate, Rocket Lawyer Attorney Services. So Rocket Law itself is not an attorney. Law Depot is not a law firm and does not provide legal advice. And then Cooligo has a policy of entering into attorney-client relationships with his clients only in accordance with certain procedures, which include executing an engagement letter and addressing personal responsibility conflicts as required by the Bar Association. Now, this was an interesting scenario. I can't remember which company it was, but one of them said, look, we're all over the place. We're all over the country. And so they cannot necessarily provide the same conflict research that other companies, that a traditional law firm provides, right? And so that's something that you need to understand, like what type of conflicts could arise that would cause, you not to want to use their services, or at least to be, be educated about issues that could arise because of the conflict. So in any of the ones that do offer legal services, if you don't have a letter of engagement signed, there is no attorney-client relationship. And one of the reasons this is really important is because you are putting your business out there, and there is attorney-client privilege when someone is your attorney. On these websites, you do not have that attorney-client privilege unless you entered into a separate relationship. Professional responsibility was covered in Cooligo. They didn't call it that in Rocket Lawyer, but as you know, or maybe as you don't know, depending on who's watching this video, but the professional responsibilities guidelines for rules and responsibilities guidelines that are issued by the ABA, and then many states have them very similar, talk a lot about advertising and in places where you are not licensed. And so here we go, Rocket Lawyer and Cooligo both do provide, additional legal services. And so they let you know that, The Cooligo site is not intended to be an advertisement or solicitation, but may be deemed advertisement in certain jurisdictions. And then Rocket Lawyer, the website and its contents may be considered attorney advertising under the rules of certain jurisdictions. So once again, we see different states have different rules. And so they put it out there like our intent is not to advertise, but some states are going to interpret what we do as advertising. Licensing was something that everyone covered. It goes to do with the licensing of your license to use the documents that you get from them. Go grants you a limited, personal, non-exclusive, non-transferable license to use our forms for your personal internal business use. Resale of forms is prohibited across the board. ORIC, we see very similar. Here are the restrictions to using their forms. And then Legalzoom grants you a limited, personal, non-exclusive, non-transferable license to use our forms. Some of these websites have kind of a membership, like a monthly membership kind of service situation. And there's no Netflix, Hulu sharing going on here, right? And so I'm sure people do it, but the terms and conditions specifically say that, you know, this license belongs to you. It is not to be shared. So yeah, they don't want everybody, you know, getting one account and sharing it. That's not the kind of party. Okay, here we go. They want to let you know here, and this provision, I'm not going to pronounce it because I always pronounce this word wrong, but basically, if one part of this term and conditions is no longer valid or is deemed invalid, the rest of the terms and conditions still stand. And to let you know that this is the entire agreement. Rocket Lawyer says a failure to enforce a provision. One second here. Rocket Lawyer says that a failure to enforce a provision is not a waiver of its right to do so later. So if we don't feel like enforcing this today, you can't say, well, last time you didn't enforce it. Okay, we chose not to enforce it that time, but we're going to enforce it this time. So just know that this still stands, right? Then we have this disclaimer of warranties, limitation of liability. This was here. This is the closest thing to just what is the disclaimer. And everybody wants to be, to let you know that they give you no warranty as to the use of the forms, right? So it's like you're using these forms. Sorry, I just keep moving this around. You're using these forms as is. That's just how it goes. As is, as available basis, and that's how it goes. And then here we have indemnification, Cooligo, Law Depot, Legalzoom, and you saw it back here too. Rocket Lawyer had it here in the disclaimer of warranty section, but it just says that you agree to make Coolie parties whole for any and all claims, losses, liabilities, and expenses arising from your use of Cooligo site or violation of these terms. Law Depot, except where prohibited by law, you agree to indemnify and hold Law Depot, its directors, officers, and employees harmless from any actions, claims, losses, damages, and liabilities. And then Legalzoom, except as prohibited by law, you will hold Legalzoom, its office, directors, employers, and agents harmless from any punitive, special, incidental, or consequential damage. So I just want to say that again. So now let's just talk about my perception. There was Rocket Lawyer. Look, I didn't plan on showing you this, but we were just gonna have to look at it really quickly because what I thought what they did was just really cool. So in their terms of engagement, if we go here, I just want to show you, I mean, they literally have a cliff notes to every one here to let you, I thought they did. Hold on one second. Where was I? I was on another computer. Oh, I was on another computer. And on one of their websites, they actually have, okay. Rocket Lawyer General Terms of Service. It's the general terms of service here. And let's see if it has it here. Okay, look at this. More simply put, so every place that it has here, it just tells you, look, cliff notes, this is what it means. Legality offer refunds. That was another thing that was covered a lot about refunds. And one of the companies actually said that, you know, basically the most money that you can get back from us is I think it was $100 or something like that, but basically it was the cost of what you paid for the form. Legal information on the Rocket Lawyer service is not a substitute for legal advice. Only a licensed attorney can provide that. So you have all of this information and they put it like this. I thought that that was really smart, right? Because the whole market for this is giving justice to those who are not receiving justice, and they understand that it's lay people and people that are do it yourself. And so they make it really simple. So even if people don't read everything, they still have an understanding. Legalzoom, I also thought was easy for lay people to understand, and willingness to pay for arbitration, very consumer friendly terms. Are written in the first person. So you're saying, I agree to hold Legalzoom harmless. And I thought that was really nice, right? You are putting people in it. And so it's like, no, no, no. You said that when you signed this. You said, I will do this and I will do that. And then ORIC was understandable, but definitely took more effort for the lay person to understand terms and conditions. And Cooligo, I liked how it was written, but it's written for a professional business audience, I felt, because that really is who they are speaking with. That's their bread and butter client, if I'm understanding it correctly. So thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Legally Rent or Legally Raven here. We haven't decided what we're calling ourselves yet, but this is just a quick video to let you know about some of the disclosures or terms of service that online legal service providers are using. Thank you. See you next time.